What is going on, everyone? Happy Monday. Welcome into another edition of GC Live. And we have got a lot of unfortunate news to talk about today, as it's the day after South Carolina was swept by Clemson over the weekend in a really disappointing 3-game series. And we're gonna break this thing all down from start to finish. And I posted it on the Insiders Forum that 1:30 today there'd be a therapy session that's free for anyone interested, and that's what we're gonna do here. We're gonna talk about the good, not much of it though. The bad, there's a lot of it, and everything kind of in between. So we didn't go live on Sunday Reset yesterday just because baseball ended up wrapping really late for me, and by the time I got done, I just decided, yeah, you know what, we're going to do this on Monday. Give us time to think more about our thoughts and stuff, and then we'll get right into it. So that's what we're going to do now. So before we get rolling, I hope you guys are all doing well. As always, we're going to talk about our main sponsor of the day right above me here. If you're watching live, but if you're listening on any of the streaming or podcast later on, I'm talking about Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans. So if you're in the market to buy a home, or you just need help with your mortgage, but you have no idea where to begin, got good news for you. Clint Hammond is your guy to get in contact with. He'll take you through the process step by step and help you out along the way. He's been in the mortgage industry for more than 20 years. He's a lifelong Gamecock fan, and he's also a longtime supporter of Gamecock Central and all of our GC Live programs. So if you're watching live, you will always see Clint and his information right above me here. But if you're listening, number to call for him is 803-422-6797. The NMLS number for him is 71597, or you can go to clinthammond.com for more information. So, all right, we can't avoid it any longer. We got to talk about this weekend. I mean, South Carolina just did not look good this weekend. There's really no ifs, ands, or buts, no way around it. There were moments in certain performances that were good, but from a team standpoint, lost all 3 games. A lot of these games were close going into the late innings. Paul Maneri mentioned that in his post-game press conference yesterday, that these games with South Carolina and Clemson, they were one-run games going into the later innings, the 8th and 9th inning. But for one reason or another, mainly the offense, which we're going to talk plenty about over the next short while here, the offense just was not there. You know, you had your one inning of scoring 3 runs on Friday in the 3rd inning, but other than that, no offense throughout the weekend. And there were like brief pulses. Ethan Petrie homering on Saturday in Greenville. And then yesterday, you got 2 runs in the 8th inning, but that was it. And you're not going to win many games, when you're only scoring 6 runs in a series. So that's not really, something you can, be too happy about. But yeah, I think just my overall thoughts at being at 3 games, I thought the environments were great. I thought Clemson, the crowd there was very much into it. And, I know people have probably seen my Twitter post or whatever, or the video I posted about the bullpen situation at Clemson. I know that rubs a lot of people the wrong way. It's Bush League or it's great for baseball, and that's how the sport should be. I think it's fine. I don't really mind the fact that, in case you missed it, Clemson moved their bullpen from having its own little area for the visitors to being right in foul territory and having the fans be right on top of any relief pitchers or anyone getting warmed up. So thought that was interesting. And then the game obviously didn't go well for South Carolina. And then Saturday in Greenville, good time out there. But again, just didn't come through for South Carolina. And then yesterday, very good crowd. Maneri was even surprised that many people showed up. The crowd was pretty much a sellout, biggest crowd I've seen so far this season at Founders Park. But again, nothing good comes out of this weekend. Losses are losses. You're 9-3 on the year, but to be fair, you really haven't played anyone substantial. and this was your first real test of the year, and you just didn't show up. You just did not have the same outcome as Clemson, obviously. And Clemson, to be fair, I thought Clemson pitched very well to South Carolina. I think that was probably the main difference. But also, while Clemson wasn't extraordinary when it came to the offense, they got the timely hits when it mattered most. And I think that is really what separates these two teams right now. Like Clemson is a team that very much could go to Omaha this year and could, I think they're going to end up going to Omaha. I think they're a great team. I mean, unless like they have two great starting pitchers with Aiden Knock and Ethan Darden. Any weekend you face those guys, you like Clemson's chances. And then I think the bullpen's been great for Clemson, and I think they have the makings of a third starting pitcher with the guy who threw yesterday, but still they got to figure it out. It's only one outing for them, but I think this team for Clemson, the Tigers, they're a very solid team. So for South Carolina, though, I think we are seeing a lot of what happened under the previous staff kind of linger over, if that makes sense. Like what I mean by that is the offense, and we'll talk about the offense first to get this whole thing going with South Carolina. The offense was just not very good last year, very inconsistent at best, and you're seeing the same thing kind of happen so far this year. And I know no one's naive to it. I've seen so many people in my mentions and on Twitter and message boards and stuff talk about how much this is Monty Lee's fault. And yes, he's the hitting coach. He's going to, besides Maneri, he's the guy that's going to take the next most blame for what's going on. But I'd even wager to say that I've seen more blame put on Monty Lee than anyone this weekend. And he is the hitting coach. And when you score 6 runs in a 3-game series, doesn't matter how it happened or what the circumstances were. That's what people see. And that's where the blame comes in. I've even seen people say that he needs to be fired and stuff, which is not going to happen right now, obviously, just because he is now the highest paid assistant coach in college baseball. Paul Maneri retained him for a reason. It's also only 12 games. And I know people probably don't like to hear that, but it's true. You're going to go through offensive slumps throughout the year. Like, I'm trying to think of an example here, but Texas A&M, I know they just won yesterday, but they were going through a slump of their own, and they had just lost to a few mid-major opponents, lost a game out this weekend. I mean, they were going through a little bit of a slide too, and they were the number 1 team in the country. So South Carolina is going through a slump offensively, and I know people are going to say that, it happened last year too, which fair point, it is. But like, you got to be able to get out of this pretty soon here because SEC plays around the corner. 11 days from now, March 14th, Oklahoma comes to town, and that begins a 30-game gauntlet of playing really good teams every single weekend. And if you thought Clemson was tough, like Oklahoma, LSU, Tennessee, Florida, Auburn, Arkansas, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Kentucky, like you're playing good teams week in and week out that are going to have good pitching staffs, and they're going to cause problems for South Carolina if they don't get things figured out here in a hurry. Now, Maneri did reaffirm that he's fully confident in Lee, saying that there's nobody that works harder with the hitters than Monty Lee himself, which that's not the issue. I don't think the issue necessarily is Monty Lee, and I've seen people throw around the fact that it's the launch angle and the home run or strikeout approach, which I think that is not necessarily true because you see the fact that South Carolina just hasn't hit home runs this year. They are like, by every measurement you see of how you want to like judge this team, they aren't a power team. That is not what I've seen from them this year. Will they run into a few home runs every now and then? Absolutely. Most definitely. But when you compare, they only have 13 home runs through 12 games. A lot of teams in the league, and I know everyone's schedule is different. Like some teams are facing, I guess garbage opponents every week that they should be blowing out, right? But you're seeing a lot of teams with home runs totals in like the 20s so far. And that may not seem like a big, gap between them and South Carolina, but that's most of the league. And South Carolina is bottom of the league in a lot of major categories, not just home runs, but I was looking back at it today. The first Monty's only been here for 3 years at South Carolina now. The first 2 years, despite all the struggles offensively, and 2023 I think was a good year for the offense, but more so last year, they were good at getting on base, top 3 on base percentage, top 6 in runs scored, surprisingly enough, for as inconsistent as this offense was when it came to having run support. But then you look at the numbers this year. South Carolina is bottom 2 in the conference, just overall in those 2 categories. So you're seeing a team that gets on base less, and when they do, they just aren't bringing home runs. And this was a weekend in which South Carolina, pulling up the numbers here, they just could not score runs consistently. They went 4 for 33 with runners on base, 2 for 22 with runners in scoring position, and 4 for 28 with 2 outs. They had 5 hits in every game this weekend, no more, no less, and they only scored runs in 3 of the 27 innings played. And like I said before, only 6 runs over the 3 games. That's not good. That's not good at all. And to make matters, I think, worse, to kind of really put into perspective how you can call it bad if you want, but it's just not good. Like you're not being competitive at the plate. And Ethan Petrie, Nathan Hall were probably the 2 main standouts of the weekend, though they all went through their struggles too. They struck out a bit this weekend, but those 2 guys in particular had 7 hits this weekend and 22 at bats. The rest of South Carolina's offense, all 7 other starters in the lineup, and I know the lineup changed a lot this weekend, but the other 7 spots in the lineup over the 3 games, 8 hits and 70 at bats. And for you math majors out there, that's a 111 batting average. Again, I think that just shows it's not necessarily one guy or one coach that is the problem. It's up and down. And I don't like to put blame on players. I don't. And I don't think it's always fair to blame just the players, even though they are the ones with the bats in their hands and they are the ones up at the plate. I think it's just an overall team issue. I think it is also just a mental thing, maybe. I think it's also the fact that they're facing very good pitching. Like Clemson has good pitching. I mentioned before, Canuck, Darden, the guys in that bullpen too, like Lucas Malstedt, guys like that, Joe Allen. It's a good pitching staff right there. That's a pitching staff that pitching wins championships, and so does defense. Clemson has it. So you look at that stuff right there. I think it's a lot of different things, and you put it all together, and you get something that just doesn't look very good. And so my point is, I don't think you can put blame on whoever you want, and like make up your own mind, but I don't think it's necessarily, from my standpoint, one individual or one thing that's going on that is the nucleus of the issues offensively. I think it's just more so a lot of different things coming together, and it's creating a nice big mess. So, and I've seen people point out the problem is, the Clemson transfers, right? And I think that's probably not a fair way to look at it, because baseball is a team sport, number one, and one guy does not make or break the team. Nathan Hall had a pretty good weekend. He went hitless on Friday, but had 2 good games after that with multi-hit performances. And then Nolan Naraki had a really tough weekend. I think that is really obvious. I think didn't get a hit this weekend, and he had the big, I only want to call it like big play, big moment in the game yesterday where Chase Luedecke had just driven in the first run of the game for South Carolina in the 8th inning. Gamecocks got a runner on base, and there are 2 runners on base, and they have the tying run at the plate. And what does Naraki do? Swings first pitch, grounds to second. Looks to be a tailor-made double play. Probably should have been. Luedecke slides seemingly into the guy throwing the ball from second base, and the throw goes wild, and Boyd is eventually called out for interference and all that. And again, regardless of that, you're swinging at the first pitch against a pitcher that was struggling. And I get it. If it's a pitch to hit in the zone, by all means, go for it. But Naraki hadn't been doing anything at the plate this weekend, and that's you're not doing yourself any favor. I mean, it should have been a double play ball. So, I mean, look, error aside, like he wasn't like if Voida wasn't there, that's a ground out. So again, he did not have a good weekend. He also made the error that led to the first run of the game for Clemson yesterday. But you can't even really blame him necessarily, because also we'll get into it in a little bit, but like the pitching staff, the bullpen yesterday gave up 7 runs. I mean, the starting pitching was great this weekend, but the bullpen kind of, outside of Brandon Stone and I guess Parker Marlott too, in game 2 on Saturday, the bullpen just wasn't very good this weekend. And that's going to happen. You're going to have stretches. Again, it's just like the offense. You're going to have stretches where you're great, and you're going to have stretches where you're not. Baseball is a game of failure. I think as if you've watched for long enough, you know that. Like, you're going to fail probably more than you succeed in this game, and you're still going to be a good team. You know, the offense is the main issue right now. I think other things like pitching, defense, South Carolina's in a pretty good spot. And I think this bullpen's going to be fine. Like I said, you know, one bad outing from some guys doesn't really mean that it's a lost cause. Like giving up 7 runs yesterday. Again, you're also facing a good offense. For as much as I've said Clemson's got a good pitching staff and a good defense, they're just a good all-around team. And I think that is what I'm trying to get at here, is that Clemson is very much ahead of where South Carolina is at right now. They're doing it in recruiting, bringing in top 25 classes, and South Carolina, again, not to make excuses, but you can't, I mean, can we just say like they are kind of left with a little bit of a mess right now with what happened last year and the lingering effects that's having? Like, again, the offense not being able to hit with runners in scoring position, very much a callback to last year. The pitching being pretty decent, that's a callback to last year. Just, again, a lot of different things that make you still feel like this is the same team. But hopefully, since it is only 12 games into the year and there's still 48 more to go, hopefully that means things will start to improve sooner rather than later. You got to do it soon here because, like I said, SEC plays around the corner. But I don't know. I mean, again, this weekend did not inspire much confidence, as many fans have clearly, shown over the last few minutes here. So let's get into some of the comments you guys have had and try to. If you guys have any questions too, feel free to drop any questions. Adam Ritter has one question: how many teams make the SEC tournament now in baseball? So it's going to be just like basketball. Every team will make it to Hoover for the SEC tournament, all 16 teams. So South Carolina will be there regardless of what happens this year. And it's single elimination. So if they lose on day 1, that's it. If they win, they move on to the next game. So it's designed to move things along a little bit quicker, which I like. The double elimination is nice and all from the past, but I do like getting all 16 teams represented in there. I never understood why. Well, I guess it makes sense that 2 teams would be left out, out of making the tournament and stuff because they weren't good. But I think it is nice to have all representation in there, and never know what can happen. So we'll see how that all shakes out. But that's very long time to go from now. And Gavin says would rather see Will Tippett than Naraki. I mean, Tippett didn't do much yesterday either. I mean, he did not really swing the bat well at all, honestly. 0 for 4 yesterday with 2 strikeouts, and he fielded his position pretty well. I will give him that at shortstop. And maybe that is something we do see over the next, few games here is if Naraki continues to struggle like he did this weekend, I think he'll be all right. I think it also just had to do with the fact that he's a Clemson transfer and this is a big weekend for him and all that. And he just, probably felt the pressure of it. I don't know. I don't know what goes on, but in the head of someone else. But that's my best guess. And I understand the sentiment of wanting to see Will Tippett. I think some guys deserve a chance to get in there and play, but if you're not producing, you're not going to be on the field. And going over 4 yesterday, just it didn't help, obviously. James Smith says over and under for the season. Your prediction? I'm not sure exactly. The phrasing of this is a little weird, but I think my prediction, again, I didn't have it written down in ink or anything, but I think my prediction going into the year was I think this team can win a regional and get to a super, but beyond that, I don't see them getting to Omaha. I definitely don't see them getting to Omaha right now where things stand. And I think there are people out there that have said the season's over and this team's done and they're finished and all that. I mean, don't listen to that stuff. Again, if you're a person out there saying that, there's still so much season left to go. And again, what the team is looking like right now is probably won't be what they look like in by May, right? Baseball, you can have a bad stretch right now and get hot later on in the year. Like we saw this last year with South Carolina. For as bad as last season seemed to be, they did get swept by Clemson, and then they were in a position to, before facing Georgia and Tennessee, they were in position to be one of the top 16 national seeds potentially. That at least that's the way it looked. And then they went out and got swept by Georgia and Tennessee and limped into the NCAA tournament. But they were in a spot to where they were playing good baseball. They were winning weekend series and having a chance to get to where they wanted to go ultimately. Same thing can happen here. I think it still can, but you got to start playing better baseball. You got to hit, and that's key number one. There are other issues, but the offense is definitely number one. Now, let's get into the other things from this weekend. Pitching staff, starting pitching, I thought for the most part was very solid this weekend. Jake McCoy, who won the Tom Price Award, which is given to the most valuable player from South Carolina in this series, he was excellent. Just about as good as he could have pitched on Saturday. Went 6 innings, struck out 12, walked 2 batters. He did give up 2 runs, both of which came in the 6th inning, but he was otherwise about as good as you can want from a starter. And I think we'll see what the rotation looks like going into this weekend. It would not surprise me if it's Dylan Eskew, Matthew Becker, and Jake McCoy on Sunday, kind of like what we've seen before this weekend, because Eskew being, injured after his last start last week kind of switch things up a little bit to where Eskew had to be bumped back to Sunday to get himself ready. And then you move up Becker and McCoy. But I think he's the best pitcher that South Carolina has right now. He has the highest ceiling because he throws harder than anyone, and his strikeout numbers are super, super high, and his walks are down. When he is not walking batters and he's commanding the zone like he has in 2 of his first 3 starts, he's really unhittable. Like he's the best pitcher I think this team has to offer when that is going on. But then you see the one start he has where he walked a few guys, still a good outing, but he only pitched into the 4th inning in his second start a week ago. So he's been very good so far. His most recent start against Clemson was probably his best to date so far this season. And again, he didn't get any run support. So 2 runs it's a lot for South Carolina's offense to come back from at this state of the game. But McCoy was excellent on Saturday, and I think he deserves to be. If it were up to me, I'd be putting him on Friday. I think that he sets the tone for the weekend. He gives you a good quality start, and he did it against a very good team. Yeah, I keep saying that Clemson is a good team. They are, and this offense, while it's probably not the strength of the team right now, they still have a good lineup 1 through 9. So McCoy striking out 12 batters gives me a lot of confidence that if he can do it against these guys, he could probably also do it the rest of the year and catapult himself from being the Sunday guy to being your Friday night ace, which I think is where this thing is eventually leading. And Dylan Eskew pitched very well, too, in his 3rd start of the year. He pitched yesterday, and you could argue maybe he pitched a little bit better than McCoy besides the strikeout numbers. mean, he had 7 strikeouts, which is still a lot, but he gave up 1 run over 6 innings and didn't give up a run until, again, Naraki made that error in the 6th inning, which led to the run, and that was that. But again, SQ gave you just about everything you could have wanted. 1 run given up, 3 hits, 7 strikeouts, 4 walks, worked very well around trouble, and could have been a lot worse given some of the tough situations he was put in. But he pitched well out of jams. And to only give up 1 run in that 6th inning where things really looked like it was about to get tough after Naraki made the error, I think that's a win. And again, he shouldn't be getting the loss. He to give up 1 run and that not be enough for the offense to work with, that's concerning. But he pitched very well. And I think there's no doubt when those 2 guys are locked in and they are commanding the zone the way they are, I don't think South Carolina has any better pitchers than those 2. And you could say the same thing about Matthew Becker. Matt pitched very well to open this year. 17 strikeouts, no walks through his first 2 outings. But you saw against Clemson in game 1, I think he had the toughest spot to be in because he's starting the game on the road at Doug Kingsmore Stadium. I expected him to pitch better. It started slow and not good. He struck out 5, also walked 5 batters, which was a huge issue for him. And he gave up 4 runs in the first 2 innings. He pitched a nice 3rd inning and struck out Cam Kennerell in the 4th inning to make it through 3 1/3 innings. But you're expecting a guy to go at least 5 innings typically. And he just didn't have his best stuff. I think it's as simple as that. I'm fully confident he's going to be fine moving forward. But it is a little bit concerning that the walks were so high after not walking anyone over the first 2 outings. And I also think it's worth mentioning, he did also have to deal with a very tight strike zone. I mean, the strike zone on Friday was really, really I think he got squeezed on a lot of calls. I think Canuck also got squeezed on a lot of calls too. So it goes both ways. But Becker walked 5 guys and it led to Clemson taking advantage. So that's a little bit concerning. And I thought maybe after this weekend, initially going into it, that Becker might end up being the Friday guy moving forward. But now I'm starting to think McCoy Friday, SQ Saturday, and then Sunday, right now I'd say Becker. And I think he's going to get himself right back on track and be a big part of this pitching staff and the weekend rotation moving forward. But we also can't ignore the fact that Brandon Stone has been very, very good for South Carolina in a long relief role. And I think he is starting to earn himself a chance to pitch on weekends for this team. He has been really solid so far. And a lot. It's not going to be talked about a lot, but when Becker came out of the game in the 4th inning, Stone came in and pitched the rest of the way and managed to save South Carolina's bullpen in a situation where your starter goes 3 1/3 innings. If you don't have Stone, who knows how it goes? Maybe you're throwing 5, 6 guys, throwing your guys that you don't use very often, like your Roman Kimballs, your Caleb Joneses, your Wyatt Evans, guys like that who don't pitch. Maybe you throw them in there when the game gets out of hand. But it didn't get out of hand because Stone pitched very well. And he only gave up 1 run, a home run given up to Jaron Purify. But other than that, 6 strikeouts, no walks, 3 hits given up on 56 pitches in 4 2/3. That's really good out of relief. And I think you look at the numbers so far this year, 1.64 ERA through 3 appearances. He has a save, 11 innings, 2 runs given up, both of which have been home runs. And he's walked 1 and struck out 10. The command's been there. He may not be, Friday was a different story. He's even admitted himself he's not this huge strikeout pitcher. He'll pitch more to contact, but he's doing his job right now. And I think maybe if he continues to pitch the way he has, and maybe someone like Becker struggles more, maybe you start to consider, hey, maybe put this guy in the rotation. I think if it were 4 games on a weekend or something, Stone would be in the rotation. But I think it's hard to put him in right now because McCoy, Eskew are two of your guaranteed starters, and then Becker had one off outing. You can't just knock him out of the rotation because he walked 5 guys and didn't have his best stuff. It's going to happen. You're not going to be throwing 6 innings of 1-run ball or shutting teams out every single week. So it's a good feeling, I think, for South Carolina to know they have a very capable starting rotation. And it's also good to know if one of your guys isn't at their best, you have Brandon Stone out there to make spot starts and pitch out of long relief and help you like save your bullpen if that is the way things are going to go. But he was very good. Other than that, the bullpen I just didn't think was very good. Tyler Pitzer gave up 2 runs on Saturday out of relief for McCoy, and then on Sunday, like I said, 7 runs given up over the final 3 innings. It's not going to cut it. And, it's just one of those things where I think it was just an off outing for the bullpen this weekend. And I think they're going to be good moving forward. I think this week will really help the team in general because you're playing mid-major opponents with Davidson. You go to the Citadel in Charleston on Wednesday, and then you get Morehead State back here for 3 games over the weekend. And I think South Carolina should win all 5 games. At the same time, though, it wouldn't shock me if they typically end up going through close games with Citadel anyway. I think that's the game that I'm most interested in because it's a road game, and you're playing, an in-state foe who usually plays up for this game. And I think that can make it tricky to where South Carolina has to be able to come through in the late innings. And if they don't, they could end up losing that game. So we'll see. But I do think South Carolina, the expectation this week should be win all your games. And then you got SEC play next week. And that could be a whole different story. But at least for this week, it's a get-right opportunity. And that's the nice thing about the way the schedule always shakes out is that you play Clemson so early in the year to where it's not right as SEC play gets going the next week, but you have that buffer in between of getting a chance to reset, figure everything out, play lesser opponents, and then you jump into SEC play. So I like it that way. And got a question here from EXO. What do you want to see this week? I mean, outside of just them playing better baseball and winning games, got to figure out this offense. That is first and foremost above all else. You have to be able to hit with runners in scoring position. I think I'd like to see more of, I feel like we didn't see it a lot this weekend. Hit and run, stealing bases, little things that matter most for a team like South Carolina that doesn't have a ton of power in the lineup right now. I think that is one thing I want to see more of is, can this team, they're not a small ball team either, but can they do the things that they were doing so well in the first few games of the season against these mid-major opponents to kind of get themselves going again? And again, maybe the ball will start flying out of the ballpark when it gets warmer out, maybe by March. I mean, it is March, but maybe when it's 70 degrees out or higher consistently, maybe the ball will fly off the bat a little bit better. Again, I don't think the ball really flew off the bat well for either team this weekend. I mean, the weather just wasn't – it was nice outside with sunny skies and stuff, but, I mean, last night was freezing. So it's obviously harder to hit the ball far when, the wind's blowing in and you got all the temperature circumstances and stuff. But I think I do want to see just a better offensive approach. I don't like the idea of taking I shouldn't say that, but I mean working the count is fine and walking is good. But you're not walking. You didn't walk much this weekend. You struck out a ton, and you kind of reverted back to everything that was so wrong with this offense last year. And that's the issue. Because I think, again, the first 9 games of the year, I think the offense was pretty good. They hit well in key spots. They went through different lulls during games, of course, like every team does. You're not going to score every inning of a game. But then there were also times where South Carolina just had big innings, and we didn't see that at all this weekend. Friday in the 3rd inning was the only example of that with 3 runs. But again, outside of that, nothing really to show for. So better offense this week has to be number one. and then just see the pitching continue to do well and the defense. You got to get right this week because if you don't, you're starting to look at a situation where 30 game conference slate, that could be a really long, tiring next few months to where it could be like basketball for the men, where South Carolina just drops a series to Oklahoma, gets swept at Arkansas, gets swept at Tennessee. And then by that point, I mean, people are already checked out and they're watching softball, which the softball team has looked great so far this year, obviously. One of two undefeated teams left in college softball. So you definitely don't want to get off to the wrong start in SEC play. It's 2 weeks away and not a lot of time to figure it out, but you hope that things just start to click. And you really do hope it's more so just a slump than anything. It's a good thing Petrie and Hall have continued to hit. That's a good thing. But the rest of your lineup, it's still a mess. That's the best way I can really put it. So not a lot there. And the other thing is, I haven't even gotten to talk about yet. You have to figure out the catching situation. And Adam brings up the point about the catching, which I'm glad he did. The catching has just been, I think it's been disappointing this year. Now, we learned yesterday that Talmadge Lecroy has fractured his right thumb, which, going back and watching, Maneri brought up a certain point in Saturday's game where the double play that Kennedy Jones made on the catchy bait in the outfield and then the throw home to end the first inning, Lecroy on the tag had, re-aggravated or, worsened his injury a little bit. So that was not ideal. But you also see watching back, he had like tape, I think, around his thumb and his hand. It's like, okay, now it kind of makes sense that what Maneri was talking about there. And you see his struggles at the plate where he's only got like 3 hits and 26 at bats. And he had 2 hits the other day, but that's really been it from him this year. So it's an injury he suffered all the way back in the first game of the year a few weeks ago. And he's played through it. He's wanted to play through it. Maneri and everyone really didn't know about it for some time, which I guess happens when it's not really brought up, I guess. But there's no real timetable as to what's next necessarily. They're going to get x-rayed today to see if it's any worse than it is currently. And then they'll figure it out from there. But it's not affecting him behind the plate necessarily, though I don't think he's been incredible behind the plate by any means. I think teams are still stealing bases quite frequently. And quite honestly, unless my memory is serving me wrong, I don't really remember him or any catcher throwing out a runner this year. I feel like stolen bases have definitely been up a little bit this year, and it is what it is. But yeah, with Lecroy, got to get it figured out, and it does suck for him. It really does suck that he is dealing with this right now because he had such a good fall, very good preseason, and then first game of the year he breaks his thumb. It's affecting him more so at the plate, is what Maneri said, and you're seeing it with how he is offensively. And the other 2 guys behind him at catcher, Ryan Bakes and Max Coffer, I know they've both homered so far this year, but they haven't been very good either. Like, especially Coffer behind the plate. He had 3 pass balls yesterday, and he's not doing much, throwing runners out and stuff. And he came to South Carolina as what we viewed more as a defensive catcher. And the hitting's been all right this year, but he also struck out a bunch this weekend. He looked, outside of one hard hit ball that should have left the yard on Friday, he didn't really do much at the plate this weekend. So, and he hit second. That's a problem right there when you're not playing great defense and you're also not hitting. So that's a worry. And I'd like to say Bakes is your best option behind the plate right now if Lecroy's down. I think he is. But he's not hitting well either. He's hitting like 111 this year. So a lot of issues at catcher. And there are a lot of, I don't want to say holes in this roster because I think they got guys that can definitely go out there and produce with this being a long season. But catcher is probably Among all issues, it's probably near the top of my list as one of the bigger issues I think this team has right now. And then the other big injury is Kennedy Jones. Like I mentioned before, the guy, had the big, double play in the first inning on the, catch and throw to home plate to gun down a runner. But he has a shoulder injury, which he sustained when you go back to Lee Croy's 2-run double on Friday. Kennedy slid headfirst into the plate, and that caused a shoulder injury that isn't feeling great right now. And obviously, when you're swinging a bat, you need your shoulder to kind of rotate, and you need it. It's more so about your hips than anything, and your footwork. You get your power through your legs, right? But also, you're holding a bat. You got to be able to swing it. So you need your shoulder to do that. And so who knows how bad it really is? He didn't say it was separated or anything, but it's not good that he had to sit out of the lineup yesterday because of it. So you hope it's nothing major with these guys. You're going to need them, specifically Kennedy, because he's hitting behind Petrie in the order almost every game. And when healthy and when he's at his best, the power just hasn't been there at South Carolina. And I think that has something to do with just facing better pitching compared to when he was at UNC Greensboro when the power numbers were really up. But he hasn't gotten off to the best start this year. He's hitting like 270, one homer, couple RBIs, nothing great. So you hope it's nothing serious with him. And then with Talmadge, again, Mainieri continues to call him a leader of the team, the starting catcher on this team. I know his season hasn't been good so far, but given his injury and the way things have kind of shaked out, you hope he's able to come back and get back to full strength here soon. Who knows how long this thumb injury is going to last for him? Who knows when it's going to heal? That's something we'll figure out in due time, I'm sure. But yeah, I think you got a lot to figure out with this team. And the good news is you have a lot of time to do so. The bad news is, are you going to be able to? I think that's my main question here is, are you going to be able to figure it out? Because if you don't, you're looking at a very long season in which you look at the preseason projections and stuff. South Carolina picked bottom half of the SEC, and no one's given them a chance to make the tournament or whatever, the rankings, all that stuff. I didn't believe it at first, but I'm kind of seeing like, okay, if this continues, then I see this team probably being a team that misses the postseason. Like, I think they are better than what they are showing right now, but they got to do it. They got to go out there and do it. Hit with runners in scoring position. Pitch the way you have. Play defense like you have been. Get more out of your lineup 1 through 9 and make the right adjustments. Because that's another thing with the offense. I just felt like all weekend, and I could be wrong on this, but like it just felt like every time they went up to the plate, it was the same thing. It felt like they were trying to do the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, and it just didn't happen. It just didn't make much sense to me. It's hard to make adjustments on the fly in the middle of a rivalry series. But now that you got the day off today from no games, you're back in action for 2 midweek games starting tomorrow. You have some time to get this thing kind of figured out, and you hope adjustments are made. And you can make all the adjustments in the world, but if the guys aren't going out there and doing it, what's the point? You know what I mean? Like you can try to change everything about a player, but if it's the same thing, maybe I don't know what it is. So it's a lot of different things to think about with specifically this offense. But again, you have to figure it out. It's the main point from today is there's not enough time. There's not a lot of time to rest and try to change up your entire coaching philosophy or your system or whatever. You got to just go. You as Mainieri said yesterday, you are who you are, and if this is what South Carolina looks like all year, it's going to be a long year. But another point is Mainieri's even said it himself. His teams, the hallmark of his teams, is, as he put it, is they start slow sometimes, but they heat up as the year goes along. And you kind of hope that's the same thing that's going to happen here. And it's very early to tell. and who knows what's going to happen. But I like to believe that this little stretch they're going through right now won't last forever. Because again, I think they're going to have a good week this week, get some wins, get their record back into good standing, and you won't win over the fan base with however this week goes. Like, it doesn't matter what you do this week necessarily, because you're beating mid-major opponents that you should beat. But if you do this again, like if you hit the way you're supposed to and you play the way you're supposed to against Oklahoma, maybe you win 2 out of 3, or you sweep that series, you won't win over everyone with one weekend, but it at least gives you a little bit more confidence that, like, hey, maybe it was just one bad weekend against an in-state rival and the tensions were high and all that stuff. And you had the Clemson players transferring over to South Carolina, and in that side story, and this being Mineri's first rivalry series and stuff, all the different angles. But maybe SEC play will be a different story. And I think it does benefit South Carolina to have that next series at home against Oklahoma, because when you go to Arkansas, for me, that's going to be the weekend where I think I'm pretty set on how to judge this team. Like, if they go out there and win 2 or 3 against Oklahoma, and then they get swept at Arkansas, I'll be like, all right, maybe this is just a year where it's just not going to happen. But also, if they go out there and maybe steal a game at Arkansas, the rule of thumb is always win your series at home and then don't get swept on the road. It's going to be tough going to Arkansas and winning a series, but if you magically somehow do that and you start out the year in SEC play like 4-2 or something with 2 series wins under your belt, this is a good-looking start to the year then. So a lot of season left to go. A lot of things can change. You really do hope it is just one bad weekend. But the good news is the offense was bad. Or I'm sorry, the pitching was good. Defense was pretty good. It's just the offense was bad. And that is, again, you're not winning games if you score 6 runs in a weekend. So we'll see what happens next. South Carolina is back in action on Tuesday night, 6:30 p.m., taking on Davidson on SEC Network Plus at Founders Park. Then Wednesday night, the team will go to Citadel in Charleston, Joseph Riley Park, and weather permitting, I've seen there'll be a little bit of rain in the forecast on Wednesday, but my plan is to be there and providing all live updates and coverage. I'll be at basketball tomorrow, though, for senior day for the men's team, and then Wednesday baseball, and then back at Founders Park to take on Morehead State this weekend. So be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Give this stream a thumbs up if you're enjoying it. Like and subscribe is the lingo, I guess. And we've got all our coverage on GamecockCentral.com. If you want to see more about this weekend and stuff, what kind of went wrong and what the future looks like a little bit, I'll have a story coming out later today on GamecockCentral.com, my usual weekend recap. It's a premium story. But if you're not already, subscribe to GamecockCentral.com. It's a great way to get involved with, reading the inside scoop on stuff and football recruiting, basketball, baseball, softball even. We've got it all covered for you. There's obviously the Insiders Forum too. So we will be back in action for another stream on Thursday with myself to preview the next series coming up with Morehead State. We'll look back at the midweek games too, and then Sunday reset back on normal schedule, hopefully, since this game on Sunday was the one outlier where it's a night game at 5 o'clock and didn't get done till like 10:30, and that's just not reasonable to do a live stream that late at night. So glad we did this today, and we will definitely be back doing this again on Sunday. And last question here before we wrap up: can men's basketball win tomorrow? Lock it in. I got South Carolina beating Georgia tomorrow. They've been playing better ball, and it's at home. John Calipari said it. If South Carolina had all their games at Colonial Life Arena, they'd be a top 10 team right now. I believe it. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Really appreciate it. I know it was a tough weekend. There's still a lot of baseball left to play. That's the beauty of it. 48 games left to go in the regular season. A lot can change in a matter of time. Y'all have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk again soon.